"Behold, this apple. You've probably eaten one like this. A red delicious? Yes? Oh. Many people think of it in conjunction with Washington State, but I want to tell you the story about the ancestry of this apple.
Now tell us the truth.
Is the truth? I swear unto, here we are at chapel, I swear unto God. This is the story of how the red delicious started right here in Iowa. Maybe you've heard of Jesse Hyatt. Let me tell you about him. Jesse was born in 1826 in Indiana, grew up working on his family farm, and they grew apples amongst a whole lot of other things. Well, Jesse grew. He got married Rebecca Jane, and they proceeded to continue growing apples, and they produced their own bumper crop, 5 children. In 1857, Jesse and Rebecca took their children and some apple tree stock and moved to Iowa, down over in Madison County, near the town of Peru, kind of near Winterset, if you don't know where Peru is. Jesse bought 320 acres of good prairie land and also some timberland, and he planted his apple trees. It was a lot of work. Now, Jesse was a Quaker man, strong faith, deep commitment to the land, his family, his church, and he also believed very strongly in order. So those apple trees that he planted were in rows as straight as he tried to have his crop rows. And he tended them as well as his livestock. Ups and downs come with farming, and it seemed like going out to his orchard was a place of a solace and peace. And he loved being out there. He developed and started kind of breeding apples. He developed the Hyatt Sweet and the Hyatt Black. They got known in the area. One year, it was 1870, Jesse was walking in his orchard, going between a couple rows of trees, and there in front of him, in the middle of the row, out of order, was a sapling growing up. He looked at that. It wasn't supposed to be there. He couldn't tell which tree it was came from, so it wasn't going to do him any good. Just chopped it down. But the next year, that sapling grew again. Jesse looked at it. "These should not be here," he said, and he chopped it down. Now the next year, 1872, that sapling, you guessed it, came back. And this time, Jesse looked at it and thought maybe he was being given a sign. This time he said, "If thee must live, thee may." And Jesse began to tend that tree. He cared for it like he did his livestock and his children. In fact, one time when a storm came in and damaged the tree a little bit, the tree got sun scald, something happened to the bark. He made a kind of a coat for it and wrapped it around that tree and kept it there for a while. For 10 years, he took care of that tree before he finally got a harvest of an apple. Let me say that again. An apple. One single apple. But that apple, it didn't look quite like this. Although it had somewhat of that shape, it wasn't as round like you will see the galas and the Fujis. No, this apple had some real shape to it. It came out and came down and almost a tapered point. It had the 5 distinct lobes, but the color was quite a bit different. There was red, but there was more yellow and blush in with it. And Jesse looked at that apple and thought it was perfect. At the right time, he plucked it from the tree. He beheld it, and almost in a divine way thought, "This is good." He took a bite. And then he proclaimed, "This is the best apple in the world." And he had his wife take a bite. She tended to agree. But Jesse couldn't get anybody else to agree with him. He tried sharing them with his neighbors, and they took them, they liked them, it was good, but, they grew their own apples. And Jesse sometimes could be a little pushy. He kept trying to let people know how good his apples were. And that tree each year kept bringing up more apples, more sprouts. He would send apples off to county fairs and to exhibitions. And finally he sent one year to the state fair. He didn't get much notice. But I told you, Jesse was a man of faith. And he had faith in his apple, which he had named the Hawkeye. Because he was now from the Hawkeye State, and it was the best apple. It was 1892. And Jesse heard about another contest that was coming up way down in Louisiana, Missouri. The Stark Brothers Nursery was having a fruit and apple tree contest. So Jesse sent some of his apples down to Louisiana, Missouri. He couldn't take them there himself. It was just too far to go, too much to do in the fall. But his apples went. Now just envision a room that was probably about this size or more, and there were just rows and rows of tables with all these specimens of different fruit, and 2 long rows just for apples. Clarence Stark and some other judges were going down the rows looking at these, and whoa, talk about the apple of his eye. Jesse's Hawkeye pulled Clarence Stark in. The shape was so different. The color was so vibrant. He looked at those and went, and he grabbed one up and took a bite, and just like Jesse, I can't guarantee if this was the truth, but I think he just might have moaned a little bit with joy. This is delicious, he said, and that's on the record. I want this apple. I want to grow these trees. I want to sell this. And he picked up the tray and started to look for the name, and Jesse was going to get the blue ribbon, except somehow or other, Jesse's name and address had gotten separated. They didn't know who had sent the apples. Now, Clarence Stark was also a man of patience and faith and perseverance. So he held that contest again the next year, hoping, praying that that grower would send the apples in. And he did. And that next year, it was actually the day the fair was supposed to start that Jesse's apples arrived. And when his workers brought them up to Clarence, "Look, they came, here they are, sir." He just looked at that address right away, and he said, "I've seen all the others. This is my blue ribbon winner." And it was. Jesse got a letter from Mr. Stark announcing that he got the proclamation and the ribbon. Oh, Jesse felt vindicated. Years and years. He wanted to take it over to Winterset, where the editor of the paper, the Winterset Herald, had had the audacity to say, "Jesse's getting a little cranky about his apple." Well, now he could show that he was a winner. Mr. Stark also wrote Jesse asking him for more information about the apple and the tree's pedigree and how it was for growing. Oh, Jesse just waxed poetic. Now, in the Quaker meeting house, he could be pretty quiet, But when it came to his apples, he was a marketer. He talked about how wonderful the shape of the apple was, how it just held up and was so durable for good storage. He talked about the tree and how its shape was wonderful and its limbs could hold lots of fruit. It didn't bend down. Now, Mr. Stark was used to growers maybe exaggerating a little bit, but he wanted that apple tree. So he took a train from Louisiana, Missouri, up to Peru, Iowa, and then he got into a horse and buggy and went over to the farm. And he met Jesse, and he met that tree, and both of them lived up to his expectations. He offered Jesse a contract. He wanted to buy the rights to propagate that tree. Well, Jesse, of course, said yes, and so it began. For years after that, people would come up and get the saplings from Jesse's tree, take them back down to Louisiana, Missouri. They were grafting them onto other trees and getting them to grow quicker. In fact, Mr. Stark so believed in that tree that he went beyond what he usually did. He started giving away saplings of the tree all around the country because he knew it would catch on, and it did. Going ahead, I got to tell you, Jesse did not get to live long enough to see how popular those delicious apples became. The Stark brothers, in like 50 years, sold over 1 million of the trees. All the grandchildren, great-grandchildren of that one apple tree there near Peru, Iowa. Now, Jesse died in 1898. His widow, Rebecca Jane, and son Sylvanus and daughter Sarah stayed on the farm for a while, but after a bit, they had to sell it. They sold it to a family called the Crofts. Now, the Crofts got some first-hand experience in what Jesse missed out on, the adulation of the public for his apple tree. People started coming from all over the country just to their farm to see that apple tree. At first it was with horse and buggy, then it was horseless carriage, and then it was with automobiles coming across. Some of you may remember how bad country roads could be. But they made the trek to Jesse's old farm to see that wonderful tree. The Croft family even had to put a fence up around the tree to protect it, because so many people were wanting to take, oh, I just want a little branch. I just want a little twig. I want a little piece of the bark. They had to be caretakers for that tree, protect it. That tree lived for a long time, much longer than Jesse. It lived until November 11th, 1940, when the Armistice Day frost hit Iowa. Almost 90% of the apple trees and fruit trees in the state were lost because of this freak storm that came through. And Jesse's tree split in the middle and died. But the next spring, another sapling came up in the middle and grew and grew and grew. There are millions of Hawkeye descendants all around the world from that one tree that Jesse Hyatt felt called to keep living. And if you want to get a tree, well, it takes a little work, but you can go to Trapple Orchard up in Wisconsin. Or if you want to eat one of Jesse's original Hawkeye apples, you can go over to the Wilson Orchard, which is near Iowa City. You can't do it right now because they're all out of them. I was going to go over and bring a whole barrel back for everybody, but they are all out. So we got to wait till next fall. And then you can take that apple, take a bite, and you can say, ah, that's the best apple in the world. Thank you.